What's up YouTube? Thanks for tuning back into the channel. So today I wanted to give my 1-year review of this beautiful Lowrider S. Check this out. So I have a 2020 Lowrider S that I got, I want to say July of last year. And I put about a little over 8,000 miles on this bike. And I think that's a good amount of miles, good amount of time to kind of understand this bike. And also just give you my 1-year impression, 1-year review on this Lowrider S. And during the time that I've had this bike, I've done a lot of YouTube reviews on this bike. The good, the bad, the ugly, things you ought to know, things like that. So I've done plenty of reviews of what I like, what I don't like, just general impressions, general thoughts. Is it good for distance? So I'm not going to go cover all of that. So I thought about this in terms of what would I want to know from someone that's owned a Lowrider S for about a year. So that's how I'm going to break down the video today. Whoop. Got distracted by that sport bike over there. But yeah, that's how I'm going to break down the video today. 1, has the Lowrider S met your expectations? 2, have you had any issues with the bike during your 1-year ownership? And 3, is there anything else that I should know about this bike before I go purchase it? So let's go with the first one. Has it met my expectations? The answer immediately is a resounding yes. The reason why I say has it met my expectations is because everyone has different expectations of what their motorcycle should be. You know, the comfort level, power, all of that is very somewhat subjective. In terms of what I expected from this Lowrider S, you know, I bought this Lowrider S because I was coming from at the time, I-83. I got to a point where I just wanted a bigger bike that can do longer distance, 1. 2, that had more power. And 3, I wanted a bike that I could kind of modify in the way that I wanted it to with the club style look. And for me, it was just time to let the Sportster go to move on to the Lowrider S in search of fulfilling those expectations for me. So those are my expectations. Now, has the Lowrider S met those expectations? Yes. Yes and yes. Like I just said, power is great. And we'll talk a little bit more about that throughout this video. The size is great. I feel like it's a really great, you know, in-between bike from a bagger and a Sportster. So it just kind of suit me really well. And also, you know, with the bigger size of the bike, it's just very comfortable. Like, there's a stark difference from when I get on from my current Sportster to this Lowrider S. I still love the Sportster, and we'll talk about that too. There's just an immediate difference in the comfort between the Sportster and the Lowrider S because of the soft tail suspension, you know, the monoshock and all that stuff. It's just a great bike. All that to say, nothing has really changed since I first purchased the bike. Still a great bike, still in love with it. In terms of what's going on over here? Yo, I just needed to let that happen. I totally lost my train of thought there. I have no idea what was going on. All right, give me a second to gather my thoughts. The next point that I wanted to talk about was, have you had any issues with the bike in your 1 year of ownership? And the reason why I bring that up is because I know that a lot of you who are looking at Softails or M8s in general, if you've done any research, you probably have come across people that have said, hey, I'm having issues with my M8 Harley Davidson. So I just wanted to go on record and document the issues that I've had since I've owned this bike. Some are more common throughout the M8s and some are more specific, I think, to this bike. So when I first got the bike, I had spark plug issues. That was one. I think that was more of a freak accident. It had like 600 miles and the spark plugs went bad. But that was the first thing. That really threw me for a loop. The next issue that I had was a little bit of a bounce, front end bounce. I read that a lot of people have had similar issues. I don't know if that's still a thing, meaning I don't know if they've taken care of that or not, or if that's still present in 2022 Lowrider S's. But I do know that for 2020, I think the hypothesis is that they got a batch of really bad front tires for the Lowrider S, and a lot of people had issues with the front end bounce. Issue number 3, this is also, I think, very prevalent in the Lowrider S's, and And I'm not saying all these things to try to scare anybody off. My gauges have been fogging up a lot. At first, it was just every once in a blue moon, either when it's too cold or like kind of too hot. There's condensation buildup in my gauge, the top gauge right here. The last thing I want to mention is that sort of like the midpoint of my ownership between, let's say, like 6 to 7 months, I noticed that the oil, when I checked the oil, the dipstick, the oil was getting lower and lower. And so I would have to fill it a little bit. I don't know what the deal is. Like Harley says that's pretty typical or that's normal. I'm not sure. I don't know what to say to that. But I do know that in the last 1,500 miles or so, that hasn't been an issue for me. I still have been checking the oil level every now and then, but for the most part, I think that's kind of settled down. So those are all the issues that I think I've had on the Lowrider S. It is worth noting that there are other issues that other people have been going through. I'm gonna go back to Marvel again. Like he had lifters fail on him on his Harley. I think that's a fairly, I don't want to say common, because common would signify that it's a lot of people, and I don't know if that's true, but I have seen that quite a bit in the Facebook forums. The idling issue is another one that I've read a lot about for owners of Lowrider S's. These are all things that I've been just kind of reading through on the forums. If you are thinking about getting the Lowrider S, you should kind of just be aware. I've said this in a lot of my videos, but just be aware of what you're getting into. And I also do want to say that I have no idea knowing how common this problem is. It could just be a recency bias where you're searching for issues on the Lowrider S, so like you're more aware and you've seen it more often. And so that just kind of gets you tuned into, hey, like this Lowrider S is a bad bike. I'm not saying that by any means at all whatsoever. I'm actually on my way to the dentist. I'm gonna park the bike and I'll see you all in a little bit. And we are back. Your boy just went to the dentist, got his teeth cleaned. What a way to start the weekend. Also, shout out to Viking bags. These are awesome for $100. They look exactly like the other bags from Thrash and Supply. So I know that I mentioned that there's a lot of issues with the M8 that's kind of known, but overall I would say don't let that scare you from getting an M8. Don't let that scare you from getting a Lowrider S, because it's hard to know all the details. The last thing that I wanted to talk about is what else should I know? And this portion, you know, these are just kind of like thoughts that I've had after owning the Lowrider S for quite some time, for about a year, a little over a year. These are just my opinions. This is an $18,000 bike, probably like 20 out the door, maybe even a little bit more. But this is the most expensive bike that I've had. And with that, there's a little bit of stress that comes with it. You know, I had to find a parking garage just now. Otherwise, with my Sportster, I would have just found street parking, right? Because I don't want this bike to get stolen or dinged up or what have you. So I'm always a little bit cautious and a little bit wary about where I am, where I'm parking it, for how long. Can I leave it there? With my Sportster, like, I kind of don't care about it. I do care about it, don't get me wrong, but if it gets dinged up, it's not the end of the world. But for some reason, because this bike is so expensive, this is my prized pig, I just really worry about it a lot sometimes. The second one is, you know, this bike isn't a bagger, and that goes without saying. Of course it's not a bagger, it's a Lowrider S. But what I mean by that is that it could potentially lead to a bagger, and this is my thought process, right? Most people, when they get into a Lowrider S, it's a fantastic bike, and I think they start to do longer trips with it. And over the course of time, they start to realize that, hey, you know, I can kind of modify this bike to try to be a bagger, put some bags on it, better suspension, etc. But it's never going to really be a bagger. One, you have to dump a whole bunch of money into this bike to even try to get it there, and even then, you know, you're not going to necessarily have GPS, sometimes radio, speakers, things like that. At that point, why not just get a bagger? I think that's the kind of the logic and the reasoning that a lot of people have into trading in the Lowrider S for a bagger, and that's generally the most common route that I've seen, people trading in their Lowrider S for a bagger. There's a lot of people that have gotten the Lowrider S and are completely fine with it, they're happy with it, that I fall into that camp. But then there are people who realize that, hey, like, this bike has gotten me so far, but I want to do longer distance. The third one that I will mention is that this bike is a total ticket magnet. If you've seen some of my older videos, I got a speeding ticket, technically like a reckless driving ticket out in Virginia for doing 78 over 55. And yeah, so I went through all that. And it's just so easy to let this bike get away from you in terms of speed. Like, it's just so smooth. It picks up speed real quick. Along with speed, you know, the M8 engine is really smooth. It's just incredible. It's smooth and buttery. But with that, part of my reason for getting back into a Sportster is because I just missed that Harley shake and the sound and the raw feel of the Evo engine, right? This M8 engine vibrates, sure, but it's not anything close to an Evo. You know, that's why I got back into a Sportster 48. I just wanted something that felt raw and, like, you know, was loud. And don't get me wrong, you could definitely get that out of an M8, but you generally have to upgrade the cam. In my opinion, you have to get the cam in order to achieve that typical potato idle. But with that, there comes more power, and I see the appeal. At the start of this video, I mentioned that I'm completely happy with the power. It meets my expectations. That is true. But what is also true is that, you know, I kind of feel like I could use more power. Just put it this way, I wouldn't mind having more power. Like, you know, when I first got this bike, I was like, there's no need for more. I'm gonna be totally happy with this bike in terms of power, etc. But lately, I kind of felt like I could definitely use a little bit more power, especially in the 5th gear and the 6th gear. When I'm really trying to climb up to speed, could definitely use a little bit more oomph there. I forgot to mention that the kickstand still sucks. I don't think they fixed that. So those are the thoughts that I've had, you know, while I've had this bike. So have I had thoughts about trading this bike in for something else? Yeah, of course I did. I think most people do. Like, I noticed for myself after about a year, roughly, or so, you know, you start getting an itch for a different bike. Fat Boy definitely tempted me for a little bit. I think that's still on my radar, but yeah, it's just not quite the time. If I sit down and think about it, I know that it's just that itch and not that I necessarily need something different. Like this bike, you know, I've said it in a lot of my videos, but it really does suit my needs for what I want in a bike. Would I, you know, recommend this bike after having a year of ownership? Absolutely. Absolutely, I would recommend this bike to just about anybody. Even with all of those issues, I am willing to overlook all of them because of how much I enjoy this bike, how much I still love riding it to this day. You know, I still think that there's a lot more room for me to grow with this bike, and that's another thing, right? Like, and I've had the privilege of owning a few different bikes. You know, the Iron 883, I've had that for a while. You know, the Lowrider S, I've had the Grom, I've had a Kawasaki Z650 at one point, Sportster 48, and with all of those bikes, I felt like, hey, I need something different. But with this one, or all my needs have been checked off. So I don't feel like I need anything else with this bike. Will it be like that forever? No. I could totally see myself going to a bigger bike when the time comes. I've said that before. After a year, still very pleased with this bike. Would highly recommend it just about to anybody. It's a fantastic bike. Can do a little bit of everything. But yeah, that's it for me today, guys. Thanks for checking out the video. And until next time, I'll see you later. Peace.